Welcome to this episode of Volunteer Corner. Now, a lot of us are hockey fans in Canada these days for obvious reasons, but we're just hockey fans anyway in general. And this face will be very familiar to so many of you, especially the voice. But this is Mike Stubbs. Now, Mike, of course, is from Global News. Mike, you've been around for so long. I hadn't realized that till I looked more and more into your background. And I saw also that you spent some time in Calgary, which is my birthplace and where I spent the first part of my life. So anyway, there's a lot going on there, but you're basically known as the voice of the London Knights. And I know that recently the Knights gave an honor to you. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, hey, I'm lucky to do what I do. You know, when you wake up in the morning and you just feel fortunate, yeah, that's kind of how I start every day. And so somebody did some counting. I think behind the scenes, somebody started wondering exactly what you were wondering. Hey, this guy's been around for a while. I wonder how many times he's stepped in front of a microphone for a London Knights game. And I don't know who counted this high because I can't count this high, but they got up to 2,000. And so, yeah, it was an honor because it's just I call myself a passenger on one of the greatest rides that you could ever be on in sport. And it's thanks to Mark and Dale Hunter and their staff for all of their hard work because my job is to tell stories. My job is to follow the team and describe what is going on. They're the ones who are actually making those stories. And it's very easy in sports for those stories to go in a completely different direction. But for the Knights, you leave the rink most days feeling really good. And I don't know too many jobs that allow you to leave the workplace just feeling really good again and again and again. But this is one of them. So I'm really grateful for all of that.
Yeah, a couple of things there. I think they're just so consistent. They're consistently good, right? They'll have their odd bad game or whatever it is, but they're just always there, always really in the moment in the games. I think that's important. But I also think Londoners love the Knights, right? Like it's just the way that it is. It reminds me a bit about the Maple Leafs, although they win a lot more. But it's just to have that kind of fan following. I often see there's a pub here that's close to where I'm at, and when I meet people there for a drink, Dale Hunter's always in there, and talking to folks, and they just gather around them, and they've all got advice, and he's heard it all, right? But just that ability to be able to take those fans and keep them going, and listening to them, and keep saying, "Yeah, we'll be there, we'll be in it." I mean, it'd be one thing if you were the voice of the London Knights and they were an obscure team, usually in the cellar, but you're not, right? You're part of a really dynamic sports enterprise that continues to evolve and do really well. I presume that's a great sense of confidence for you as well, eh?
Yeah, you learn a lot. You
Yeah,
really do. You learn how to treat people. And you mentioned Dale. Dale understands people better than anyone I've ever met,
yeah,
where just what it is that is going to make you tick, what it is that's going to make you better, how to get that messaging through to you.
yeah,
And he has patience until the end of the earth.
mm,
And Mark at this is the same, where
yeah,
you're always looking at that long game. And you mentioned the
yeah.
fans. The fans have been incredible. And
So
I
many, yeah,
think one of the yeah, one thing that you look at is when they built what was the John Labatt Center that became Budweiser Gardens, that became Canada Life Place downtown. And they hadn't opened it up yet, but they had the blueprints and they were in the process of building it. And they brought a number of people together. And they said, well, for hockey, we will have 5,000 people and we'll have a curtain that drops down. And you would think, yeah, that makes sense. But that curtain has never dropped
mm,
for a London Knights game outside of the pandemic, just because of that tremendous support. And it's a great relationship between the fans and the team. Dale is very cognizant of the fact that you've got to put a good product on the ice. You have to have something entertaining. So the team will sometimes play a little bit differently on the road than they might play at home, just for that reason, to
mhm.
make sure that that entertainment value was there. And most recently, I mean, when we got talking about all of the booing of anthems and things like that, the Flint Firebirds came into town. And you had a crowd that was going to listen to a U.S. anthem, the Star Spangled Banner, and it was sung by a public school, and you could hear a pin drop.
Mm-hmm.
They allowed that school to sing, to go through the preparation that they had gone through to be ready to perform in front of 9,000 people. And then they applauded at the end, and then everybody joined in and sang "O Canada." And that was just one of those moments that you look back at and say, yeah, that's what this community is about.
Yeah.
That's what we do here, and that's how we do it.
Yeah. Mike, you started at CHRW all those years ago, I think up at Western, correct? Can you just tell us how you got from there to Calgary and then back to here?
Well, CHRW was a fantastic learning ground. Mario Cercelli, I owe him everything. He
Mm.
ran into the newsroom one day. He says, "The Knights are looking for a play by play guy. You need to send in a demo tape." And I didn't even have a demo tape. And so he helped me and got all kinds of clips together, and we put it on a clear cassette tape. And I remember that. And I've heard the
Mm.
story since then where got handed in, and there were a pile of cassette tapes on a table, and they heard mine, and somebody went running from downstairs to upstairs or upstairs to downstairs, wherever they were listening. We got to talk to this guy. We got to talk to this guy. And so lucky enough to get involved there. And from there, Victor Carnero, who's a scout in the National Hockey League right now, was working with the London Knights, and there was an ad in the hockey news. Remember when there were ads in newspapers, Glenn? There was an
I
ad in
do.
the hockey
Yes, I
news,
do. Yeah.
and it was looking for a talk show host in Calgary. And so I was young at that point. My wife and I were just married, and so she said, "Well, you should apply. Let's see. Let's go on an adventure." And so I didn't apply for the talk show job as much as I just sent my play by play demo. It had now been updated, but play by play demo
Yeah.
because I knew they would have to listen to. And ultimately, I ended up getting the job as the pregame show and the postgame show host for the Calgary Flames. Did that for a couple of years. We had our adventure, but we missed this part of the world. And when we started to have a family, it was time to come back. And it all worked out very seamlessly. I'm going to use that word lucky again, where Mark and Dale Hunter were purchasing the team. And I was fortunate enough to kind of come with them. And since then, it's been an incredible ride.
Yep. And what an adventure it would have been, even if you were just there for a couple of years in Calgary. It's where I was born, as I said, and was raised there. But you just have endless choices there, like the Banffs and the Jaspers and the Prairies and the Bow River and the Elbow River and on and on and on it goes. So it'd be a great experience, I think, to just go out there and see that. Was it kind of family then that brought you back, or was something like you said you had your adventure? What made you want to come back to London? Was it the night's
It was
invitation,
tough.
or was it?
Yeah, it was kind of a lot of things, Glenn. We
Yeah.
had this round kitchen table, and I remember my wife and I sitting down, and we actually grabbed 2 pages of foolscap, and we wrote pros and cons on
Mm.
both sides. Because you're right, gorgeous.
Yeah.
Alberta, Calgary, all around that area. And
Yeah.
the people are
Yeah.
wonderful, like
Absolutely. Yeah.
absolutely wonderful. And so it was a decision to come back. But ultimately, yeah, we were having our first child and we wanted to be a little bit closer to home. And I missed doing play by play. I really did.
Mm.
And I learned so much working under Peter Marr and Doug Barkley and with the Flames, just a dynamite organization. Again, just good people.
Yeah.
And you wish the best for them for that reason.
Yeah.
And so it was a difficult choice, but I've never looked back and wondered what if. So it
Yeah.
must have been the right choice.
That's right. That's good. Well, Mike, there's a reason why I've got you on Volunteer Corner, actually, and it's got nothing to do with hockey. Although Jane won the gold medal for the senior woman, and that was a wonderful thing. So we've hung it up here. We made a big deal about that, and it's good. And our daughter plays hockey, but this isn't about that really. Why you're on here? It's the fact that on the radio station when you host your program. We'll have something like, let's say it's a food drive. We have one coming up, for instance, for the spring food drive, which is a big one. And suddenly, I'll hear from your team, and they'll say, "Could Mike do an interview with you this afternoon or tomorrow or whatever it is?" And so I'll say, "Sure," and I'll get on with you, and we get set, and then suddenly I'm on air with you, And what I've really appreciated about you is that we might only have like 6 or 7 minutes, but you don't mess around, right? Like you don't sit there and say, okay, where can people drop off their food? Like you fit that stuff in a rush at the end. But what you really are asking me all the time is, how did we get here? How did we get into this place where we've got so many people that are hungry, or 6,000 families coming a month to the food bank? What's responsible for that? What can be done about it? And I find that very interesting that you dig deep right away, and you try to get to sources and solutions and other things. I presume that is the way you are. And when you look at a social problem, let's say something like, I'm not even saying as a radio personality, but you look at housing or you look at food insecurity or something. Are you the type of guy that does a deep dive on that right away, just thinking about it?
Yeah, I try to. I mean, again, fortunate to be able to do a radio talk show and have that
Yeah,
connection with the
yeah,
community, because it really does open a forum. And the media landscape has changed an awful lot, but it's really nice to feel that forum that still exists, where you have people who are caring about the exact issues that you're wondering about and you're working on and you're helping with on a daily basis at the food bank with Jane, Glenn, and the idea that you do have these issues, and we do have to find solutions, because if we don't even try to find those solutions, everything's just going to be exacerbated and it's going to continue to grow. And I can't imagine where we would be right now, given the numbers that you just talked about, if it wasn't for all of the social agencies that existed, if it wasn't for the London Food Bank. So we do have to look at things. And so it's always about just trying to tell those stories, so at least we can provide the tools or the knowledge or the know about, so that somebody a whole lot smarter than me can try and figure out the know how and figure out how to do it. So
yeah.
to be able to call attention to certain things in the format that we have is important, and it's something that we definitely try and do a lot.
Mike, I think it's important that I say how much those kind of questions that you ask, or those observations like you just made, how much that means to us. We're not, we don't just fly in and fly out, Jane and I. We've been there for 40 years. We've watched the changes that have not only happened here in our community, but in communities across the country. We're also part of the Ontario Food Bank Network and the Federal Food Bank Network, and we're seeing many food banks starting to close or to ration, including in Toronto, in Hamilton, in Ottawa. Like this is pretty serious stuff. And so, when Jane and I get together at the end of the day, and before she sits there and watches hockey, um, we talk about this stuff, and it feels so oppressive sometimes. Like it's really hard. Like we so much believe in what we're doing, and so much believe that there's enough food in this country to help people, and yet we're out of sync. Something is not quite happening right the way that it should. And I think it's very hard to be a food bank director like Jane and I are, and just kind of skip along and thank people for the food and the food drive and for all the volunteers. We have 3,000 volunteers at the food bank. It's absolutely wonderful. It's fantastic, right? At the same time, the weight that you carry is significant. And sometimes that weight, part of the reason why it feels so heavy, is because you can't really talk about it. People are hesitant to bring up some of those things, but you've never been like that. From the very first interview I ever had with you, you cut to the chase right away, and I found that I did too, because I've just been sitting on that kind of, it's kind of a weight that sits on you, and the ability to be able to talk to someone in the media and really get into some of this stuff and talk about it. The fact that's amazing is that I might talk to you 5 times a year, maybe, and it's always for 5 or 6 minutes, but so much comes out in that time because you bring it out. You also speak to it yourself. And I think the reason why you're on Volunteer Corner is because I think in many ways you have been really good for me. And I think that's important that I say that to others as well. It's not easy to carry these responsibilities. And I'm not trying to make this about me. I'm just saying that the times that we are living in, and when you're around for 4 decades, you would really like to be able to speak about some of these things that you've learned, the good and the bad, how you struggle. And I just think it's such an irony The guy who's the voice of the London Knights brings that out of Glen. I just think that that's pretty special, and I do appreciate it. And I told Jane I want to have Mike Stubbs on because of that. She totally agrees because she feels that about you as well. Um, I when you do that, and I know you interview others as well, social agencies and others. Do you get the sense that that's what's happening, or no? You're just trying to get information out of them.
I hope that's what's happening. I
Yeah,
hope that we're having that deeper discussion because anymore you can find out about the what and the where and the when. You want to get into the how and the why. Those are the real components of a story. How is something happening? How are we going in the direction that we're going? And then with
yeah,
that, the why. Because without understanding those two things, I don't know how we do make changes. And even knowing sometimes the how and the why, even when you describe, I mean, the one maybe frustration that exists from the forum that we have is we can raise all of these issues. So Glenn, you and I can spend those 5 or 6 minutes and we can talk about the fact that we're heading in this direction or the
yeah.
numbers have grown again for individuals who are making use of the London Food Bank. And at the end of it, you wish you could take a nice little bow and
Hmm.
you wish that you could tie that bow and that
Hmm.
would be it and say, okay, now we know that. Here's all we have to do. And then
Yeah,
everything's going to be better.
yeah,
But you can't. I
no,
think that right there is something that I regret having to leave listeners with, but at the same time, you do, because that's the story. That's where we are. There isn't an
hmm,
end right now. And you do such a great job illustrating, okay, well, here's what's happening. Here's what's happening at our food bank. Here's what's happening at other food banks around the country. Here's what's happening from a government perspective, because you have that great experience. But I think we'd all love to just be able to sit down and
yeah,
say, all right, if we got 20 people into a room and lifted up that weight that you're talking about, could we move it somewhere else? Could we
hmm,
fly that off into space somewhere? Could we
hmm,
make that go away?
yeah,
And unfortunately, we haven't been able to just yet.
yeah,
And I think that's one of the most challenging things that hopefully, the with all the information that we have these days, that it's not just flying by, that
yeah,
at some point somebody's grabbing that information and saying,
yeah,
look, yeah, we're getting to a point or we're well past that point where we got to do something. We got to make some
yeah,
changes here.
yeah. Well, Mike, you mean a lot to us. I mean, not you're. I realize you're the voice of the Knights, and I realize that you're, on the media. But you've helped to bring out our voice, and it's that a bit of a darker shade in our voice about the challenges that we face and the experiences that we face. And you're also very good at bringing out the good side of it too. I know there's times you emphasize the volunteers and others that are at the food bank. But it's wonderful to be part of a community where you're not only acting and trying to help people, but there's other people that are trying to assist you to get that message out there, not just the message of an event, but why we're here in the first place, and what are we doing and how do we get out of that. So you mean a lot to us at the food bank. We got a lot of sports fans, crazy sports hockey fans at the food bank who just think the world of you. But for us, for Jane and I, thank you. I think these are very important things that we're talking about, and someday we're going to look back on it and realize people were having those discussions and they really really mattered, and eventually we'll be able to get out of it. Thank you for this, Mike, and thanks for what you've done for the food bank, and congratulations on the 2,000 games and that you've done, and the award that the Knights gave you. I think that's wonderful. I'm really glad you're in our community.